Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday School Dropouts podcast. This is Laura. You will notice that Andrew is not with me today. He had some personal things going on. So parts of this episode is just going to be me. Part of it is going to be with me and a guest. And then Andrew will make an appearance every here and now and again for some certain segments. But I just wanted to welcome everybody. I'm so excited for this podcast. Today, we have a wonderful guest in store for you. But before we get to that, we have a few other things we're going to talk about. I'm going to shamelessly plug that I have a book coming out. I'm so excited. It is going to be out in a week from today, October 17th, 2023. But it's available for pre-order. So it is called When Religion Hurts You: Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Control Religion. I'm so excited for everybody to read it, and it's going to be in your hands next week. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So yeah, order it. No, this is a culmination of my own research, my own story, and then many, many wonderful clients and other people who have contributed their wisdom to this book. And so I'm really excited. It's a non-prescriptive book, but it talks a little bit about the experience of living in a healing body after high control religion and religious trauma. So I'm thrilled. You can purchase it wherever you buy your books. So today we are going to have a guest. Her name is Tara Teng, and I'm so excited. I met Tara a couple years ago now. I found her like I find everybody on Instagram, and she was somebody that we connected right away. And both of us were really interested in learning about what the other person did and figuring out ways that we could work together or support one another. I have found her work to be so, I'm going to use the word beautiful, because she just has this grace and compassion that exudes from her just by even kind of watching her and kind of observing her. So I've been really, really encouraged to be able to get to know Tara over the last couple of years. I had the privilege of being able to read her book early and put my own endorsement in it. I was so privileged, or felt so privileged and honored to be able to do that because her book is amazing. I'm going to wait until the interview for that to come up a little bit more, because I want her to be able to promote that for you. But we're going to talk a lot today about embodiment, which is sometimes like a bit of like a buzzword on social media. And yet the way that Tara views it is that it is integral to our process of healing, as well as just existing as humans. And so I'm really excited for you to hear about that. But I wanted to talk about embodiment a little bit before we get to that point, because I think that, embodiment, it's kind of this elusive concept, right? Like, what is it exactly? And it's going to sound funny, but the definition that I use, or the way I explain it, is it's the experience of living in your body and living as a body. In high control religions, cults, fundamentalism, oftentimes one of the things that happens is they kind of cut us off right here. We live from our shoulders up, and we forget that we have a body. And I really think that one of the reasons that religion encourages us to live in this headspace is that because if we actually did tune into our bodies, if we connected to ourselves, the story that we would hear, the information that we would hear would be very different than what's coming from outside of us. So it benefits religion and cults and fundamentalism to cut us off from our bodies and to live in our heads. It is far easier to control people if we disconnect them from their bodies. And so embodiment is the experience of living in your body and living as a body. And so it's this holistic concept. When I say I'm an embodied person, it means that I feel my body. I feel the emotions, the sensations. I feel the experience of my body. And I lean into that instead of suppressing it or cutting it off and fragmenting it or dismissing it like I was taught to in religion. And instead, I use my body as a way to gain information and as a way to live within this world. And that's how I navigate. I live in this world as a body, in my relationships, in the way that I, walk about this world and whatnot. So that I'm not going to, get too much more into it, because I'm so excited for the conversation that we get to have with Tara. And like we talk about in other episodes, Andrew and I recognize that some of the topics that we discuss in any of the episodes might bring up feelings, emotions, and triggers that might require more processing, or might be just a little bit too much to handle right now. So please always feel free to skip any episode or parts of episode and come back if and when you're ready. Our goal is to help you trust your own body and your own lived experience. And so our podcasts are meant to take what you need and to leave what you don't. So I think, we could talk about embodiment. We could talk about all the things all day. But you know what? Let's just put that to the side. And instead, I think we should probably just have a little bit of a vocabulary lesson.
Okay, Andrew, I think that it's time for a little vocabulary lesson. And this week, I thought we could talk about the concept of being triggered, because that is something I hear about a lot on social media. I hear it from my clients in everyday language. I was so triggered about this, or do you feel triggered? Things like that. So I thought it'd be a good idea that we have a little discussion. And to lead us off, I'll just put you on the spot and ask you, how would you define what a trigger is?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. And that is a word that comes up a lot. I mean, at the most basic level, without going into any larger explanation, I just would consider a trigger a nervous system response to a stressor. There could be small ones, there could be large ones, everything in between. I mean, I think that this can also get oftentimes thrown out there interchangeably with things like trauma responses and that whole thing, which I think we might have touched on this before, but but again, I just look at that as being I would just call it like a nervous system response to a stressor. What are your thoughts?
I think I like the idea of a nervous system response. I think it's pretty common that most people associate the word trigger with something negative. Right. I think at its most basic level, a trigger actually is in some ways fairly neutral. It doesn't have to just be for a negative experience. It could be also positive. Something that our nervous system is remembering, is associating back to another time or place. And that is usually connected then to some sort of a physiological response. Maybe it's like our heart starts beating faster, or we start to feel ourselves wanting to run away, or things like that. The reason I say that I know for me, I've been trying to shift my language a bit, is because I'm like, okay, so there's certain say smells that kind of trigger some really positive memories for me, from my childhood, or when I see a root beer barrel hard candies, that is a trigger in a sense. I'm reminded of my grandmother, right? And so I think that colloquially and conversationally, we tend to associate triggers with something negative. I would say I really like what you said about it just being a physiological response to something in the present moment that is associated to something in the past. And so that usually is felt in our bodies. And we feel it physiologically, even if we're not cognitively associating it with something. I like what Pete Walker says in his book. I think it's just called Healing CPTSD. He actually calls them emotional flashbacks, where it's like our body is back in that moment, even if we're not cognitively remembering or having images in our mind of what's happening. So that's a bit winded, but to say, a trigger is a physiological response to something in the present that reminds us of something in the past.
Yeah, and I like that. I really like that approach. I like that definition. Cool, because even what I said, I like a nervous system response, but then I think I still said even a stressor, but not necessarily a stressor. It could be a good thing, like a perceived pleasurable, pleasant memory, not necessarily something that elicits stress.
Absolutely. I think that maybe it kind of leads into the next piece of this is if you're triggered, does that mean you have trauma? Because that I think is where, you even mentioned it, like the trauma response thing, and people oftentimes tie the two together. So does a trigger mean that you have trauma or maybe even some other sort of mental health dis-ease?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the short answer I would say would be no.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean, if we're just going to be short and sweet about it. Yeah. Well, because but like what we're saying, like if you're, even in the context of, because people will conflate like trauma response with being triggered. But well, first of all, even to say that is presuming that triggering is a negative, something with negative connotations, which like you're saying, no, not necessarily. But yeah, does it mean you have trauma? No, it doesn't mean you have trauma. And even if you have a nervous system response that is oriented around a stressor, so something that's distressing to you, that still does not necessarily mean that it's trauma though. And perhaps I'm getting us off into another conversation that we're not trying to have today, but yeah, the short answer is no, but I'm curious what your thoughts are, or if you'd want to elaborate on any of that.
I would agree with that. I do think that those of us who have highly sensitive nervous systems, as a result of trauma, I think that it's likely that more things might trigger us more frequently. But I agree with what you're saying of like, I think being triggered is part of the human experience. Like if we're looking at this as a nervous system response, so we're looking at our physiological state, something's happening inside of us. That's relatively neutral, right? Like it's just, we don't have cognitive abilities in that moment to say, to like determine what will trigger us or what will not trigger us. And so it's just our body, our nervous system doing what it's supposed to do. And I do think though that it, especially when we're talking about complex trauma, I think that's where more people might kind of, at least in the work that I've done with my clients, I would say my clients who are kind of in that space of complex and developmental trauma seem to be dealing with more triggers than those who do not have those experiences in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that I absolutely, that makes sense. So another question relating to all of this, then, can people trigger you?
So we'll go with the short, easy answer. Yes. Now, I think I want to expand on that though. Like, I think that certain people can trigger us. So for instance, we might notice that around certain family members, we feel highly triggered, sometimes without them doing anything. That though is usually a response that's coming from that very subconscious space of our nervous system that may not be reflective of who they are in the present moment. And also not necessarily reflective of trauma. And the reason I kind of an example I might give to that is many of us, when we go back to our parents' home or even when we're like around our family, we oftentimes start to act the same way we did as a child subconsciously. Like we don't consciously be like, okay, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to act like I was when I was 14. But something about those relational dynamics and that environment, it kind of triggers our body to go back into some responses and ways of navigating relationships that were necessary in the past, even if they may not be in the present. Even if your parents or other family members or you have done a lot of work at repairing relationships or putting in boundaries or communication skills or whatnot, it's very easy to go back into those patterns. And so I would say that yes, that people can trigger you, but that's not always reflective of their present day actions and ways of communicating. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I honestly, exactly what you said is probably what I would say. I mean, to just geek out on the neuroscience, I guess. I mean, I might acknowledge like how, what's happening is like, there's probably stimuli, like perhaps like the smell of your great uncle's aftershave. Very neutral. It's like, it is what it is, but that's a stimuli that probably does have a lot of other associated neural pathways that are that then take your brain and your body, your nervous system to these different places. And depending on what the past was, it might take you to places where, suddenly you notice you are tense. You're breathing more shallow. Your body's on heightened alert, ready for stuff to happen. And it's not literally based on what's happening in the present moment, but it is based on things that happened in the past that your nervous system helped you survive. And it's just being hypervigilant based on those same stimuli. Again, that's kind of the neuroscience-y thing approach, I guess. But I mean, I might depending on my client, I might explain that, because I know some folks are all about it. They want to talk neuroscience and understand it before we really drop into the embodiment stuff.
Yeah. I actually think that piece of it is what can help to alleviate a lot of shame, because I think I know for myself and for a lot of clients, they'll experience a lot of shame if they are triggered by somebody or something that happens. So maybe they've been doing a lot of work in their own trauma resolution or healing and those sorts of things. And then they go somewhere one weekend and they get massively triggered by whatever is happening around them. And they will come back and they'll be like, oh my God, I was so triggered. Like, this is all for nothing, And what I always like to tell them is that, the goal of healing trauma is not that your triggers are going to be eliminated. It's that when they happen, we would have other coping mechanisms and resources that we could draw into that would help us navigate that trigger in a different way. So we're never going to be able to get rid of all of our triggers because we just simply cannot know what they are. And sometimes explaining that neuroscientific piece of it is like, we don't necessarily have control over that. That can be really helpful, and then can open up some space to be able to build some resources for those moments where we are triggered and we can handle them differently.
Yeah. And that actually is a good segue into my last question here. And that simply is it someone else's responsibility to make sure they don't trigger us? Like, how does that? What would you say to that? Like, what responsibility does someone have? Especially, I
would say ultimately, no, it's not other people's responsibility to make sure that they're not triggering you. For the simple reason that, that's a lot of responsibility for other people to carry, to make sure that their actions are completely in line with making sure that you're safe and you're safe and you're safe and you're safe. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for their own individuality and autonomy and things like that. Now, so I do think that I am responsible when I'm triggered. I have to be the one to come back to a place of safety. I cannot expect you, whoever the other person is, to provide that for me. I do think, though, that when we're in relationship with other people, depending on the type of relationship, the depth of intimacy, things like that, we might be able to ask for support in the midst of those triggers, or notice that, hey, when my partner does X, Y, or Z, I get really triggered. Could that be a conversation I have with them? Because maybe it's just like a little thing that they could change. It's like, hey, when you I don't know, I've heard this as an example. When you don't take the trash out and it's full, I get extremely triggered because growing up, we had, a very unsanitary environment, and the trash was overflowing, and that led to rodents and animals and, all these things. And so when I see that you're not taking the trash out, it's overflowing, that really triggers me and puts me in this space of anger or this or that. That's an actual client example. So I'm not making that up. And so we go, okay, that could be a really easy fix for the partner to say, you know what? I can absolutely do that for you. I can make sure that when I see the trash getting to this level, because this is my chore that I'm doing, I'll take the trash out. And so I do think that we can ask for support, but I don't necessarily think it's other people's responsibility to be on the lookout to make sure that I am not triggered. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I do think depending on relationships, depth of relationship, there can be conversations and that can look different depending on who you are. And what you just described there, though, I think it's one of those things where, in a relationship, I think other folks can help support. The thing is that whole conversation, that whole dynamic needs to be collaborative as opposed to coercive. In other words, I can't demand that when you do this thing, it pisses me off. I need you to stop doing that thing. I'm not leaving any room for discussion. I'm not leaving any room for curiosity or compassion to what you're feeling, what you're thinking, or why you're doing it in the first place. I think, but coming at it from more of a collaborative place where I'm you know, assuming the best about you, but this thing is distressing me, and I just want to see if we can talk about it, you know. And I think that's a very different mindset that's much more helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's important too, then, as we're in public spaces and in relationship with one another. I think especially coming out of high control spaces, as we're relearning boundaries and we're renegotiating how to interact with people, we can oftentimes swing to this other side of the spectrum of saying, like, you must do these things in order for me to be safe. And we call those boundaries, right? When in reality, it's like, here's the rules for how to interact with me. And if you don't do them, because I get so triggered, because I have these intense physiological responses, that means that you're not safe. It means that you're a harmful person. It means that you're disrespectful. You're plowing over my boundaries. Maybe they are. I don't know. Right. But in so many other cases, it's just that our nervous systems are so activated that we're feeling like, if these other people could just not do this thing, then I'll be fine. That might be true, but in most cases, that's usually kind of the little red flag that our body is waving to say, hey, this right here, this is where I need support. And that's not to say that others then have permission to do or say or act however they want to towards us. There are some natural consequences for that, but usually a trigger is the indicator of maybe where we need some more support. And in most cases, that support needs to come from inside us. And that's just kind of how I explain that, add on to it. Yeah.
No, yeah. I think that summarizes it all perfectly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, just to kind of, as we're wrapping this up, this may be a conversation that we have in a greater depth at some point, because as we've gone along, we've recognized that so many of our vocabulary lessons might be worth having much longer conversations. So, we will likely revisit this topic again and go a little bit more in depth, specifically around some of the religious trauma pieces and resolving and recovering from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love, deep diving stuff.
Yes.
And I realize that's not the purpose of the segment. So yes.
Well, we'll get there someday. Until that point, there's your vocabulary lesson for this week, and we'll end things there.
Sounds good.
Okay, everybody, it is time to pray. But before that, we got to take our prayer requests, right? So Andrew is sending his thoughts and prayers from afar. He is sorry to miss this time of prayer with us today. So it's just going to be me. But I'm excited to share with you what the Lord has laid upon my heart. It's going to be a little bit different today because I wanted to share with you a little bit more in depth about a project that I've been working on and lift up my book, When Religion Hurts You: Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Controlled Religion. This is what the Lord's laid on my heart today and for a couple years. I am so excited to share this with everybody. I know Andrew has talked about it a little bit in some of the previous episodes, but this book is going to be out next week. So for those of you listening right now, when this episode drops all the way through next week, October 17th, if you purchase this book, you could actually get a few pre-order bonuses by going to my website and just uploading a picture of your receipt, and they'll be sent directly to you. And if you're listening to this episode or ordering the book afterwards, you still get the book, and that's pretty awesome. It's also available on Audible, so you can listen to it if you are somebody who prefers that. But I wanted to just share today a little bit about what this process has been and why this book is landing in your hands. Because I'm excited, and it really goes along with the purpose of this podcast. So I was actually approached about writing a book about 2.5, 3 years ago. However, it was an extremely busy time in my life as I was finishing up my PhD and dissertation. I was opening the Center for Trauma Resolution and Recovery. I was building a house, and then I was moving. And so this wonderful woman approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to write a book?" And I said, "I do, but just not right now." So she was really gracious. She gave me about 6 more months. And then the day that I said, "Contact me on this date." And sure enough, there was an email from her that morning. And she said, "Let's talk. I think what you have to offer is something that people could use." Now, she started off by asking me if I had ever thought about writing a book, which indeed I had. I actually had the whole entire book written. It was more of a memoir type book, but she said, I think it'll be good, but I think what you should actually write is a book on religious trauma, kind of like A Body Keeps the Score, the one by Bessel van der Kolk, but for religious trauma, which I was honored and terrified about because those are big shoes to fill. Not that I ever even am going to try to fill them, but that's a tall order because Bessel van der Kolk's book is like a seminal work of art in the trauma world. And so I wanted to do right by that because the fact of the matter is there's not a lot of resource for people who have been a part of high control religions and are wanting to get out of them, are trying to understand the things that have happened to them and are wanting more options than just becoming an atheist. And so that was kind of the origin of this book. Luckily, I had just finished my dissertation, and the research that I was doing was on the experience of living in a healing body after sexualized violence, which also included purity culture. And that research then allowed me to expand into kind of some of the themes that we see in my book. And truly, my book is about the experience of living in a healing body after high control religion, after adverse religious experiences and religious trauma. That can be such an overwhelming thing, especially for those of us who have grown up in it. Our entire identities are turned upside down and we're trying to catch up and heal so many different areas of life that it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes we wonder if we should have even started this process in the first place. And so what I wanted to do was provide a sort of a resource that could act as a piece of encouragement as well as a source of hope that life isn't always going to be like this, but that healing is this like beautiful lifelong process that happens in the small moments, in the moments of nuance, and that every moment counts, and that it's not about getting to a finish line. It's not about always reaching a specific goal. It is simply about living in a way that is different than maybe how we had grown up, and different in the sense that we are able to kind of, I would say, like live wholeheartedly, meaning that the past isn't constantly interrupting our present and our future. So in the book, if you read, I mean, you could kind of read some of it. It doesn't have to necessarily go chronologically, but I share my story in the first chapter. It's not like comprehensive. It's not every detail, but I shared it because I wanted people to know that this is something I understand very deeply, like on a personal level, even though I also understand it on a professional level. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are about what is trauma, what is spiritual abuse, what are adverse religious experiences, what is the nervous system, how does it all work together? And then the rest of the book, chapters 5 through 13, are all about some of the different themes that we see when we are resolving and recovering from trauma and living in this different way. Now, I wanted to make sure that this book was not a book that just simply was like, religion is bad, and so you should get out of it. There's so many people that have done great books and podcasts and social media accounts that talk about the cognitive deconstruction, what is harmful or negative about different religious beliefs, practices, theologies, doctrines, lifestyles, all the things like that. That's not what I wanted to create. Instead, I wanted to create a resource that goes like, hey, when these are the things that are being taught about this specific area, we'll say boundaries. Here's kind of some of the natural implications of it. And as we work in this like process of like living in a healing body, so ongoing healing process, here's some of the things that we start to see. Here's some of the things that start to show up in our lives as a result. So I'm really excited about this. This book is not just for people that came out of the same faith tradition as I did. It's not for people that have only experienced the things that I have. I wrote this book in such a way that it would be applicable to anybody coming out of a high control religion, cults, fundamentalism, purity culture, all of those things. Anything where there's that controlling hierarchical system, this book absolutely applies. So that is my shameless little plug that I am, lifting up in our hearts today. But it will be available worldwide next week, October 17th, 2023. It is available for pre-order before then, wherever you buy books. Of course, I always encourage you to purchase from your local bookstore, or you can request a copy from your local library. Like I said, it's also available on Audible. And if you purchase it before October 17th, you can head to my website, drlauraeanderson.com/book. And there is a place where you can upload your receipt and you can get the pre-order bonuses. So I am really grateful for that. I'm grateful that you have taken the time to hear this prayer request of mine. And with all that, all God's people said, amen.
All right. Well, before we bring Tara in for our interview today, I just wanted to read her bio because she is such an incredible human being. So as you know, today's guest is Tara Teng. Tara is an embodiment coach who works in the intersections of spirituality and sexuality. She helps people find their way back to their bodies, overcome shame, heal trauma, and dismantle purity culture in a way that is in alignment with their values and beliefs so that they can build a healthy sexual ethic and thrive in freedom and wholeness. Tara comes to this work after witnessing her generation's struggle under the oppressive confines of purity industries movement in the 90s and 2000s. Woo, totally get that. I know that. Bringing with it all the religious trauma, broken relationships, sexual dysfunction, autoimmune disorders, and sexual violence that ensued as a result of abstinence-only teaching that left us with an unhealthy obsession with virginity and lack of sexual ethics in our relationships. I'm sure so many of you can relate to that. I know that really resonates with me. Tara works one-on-one with clients through coaching and focuses her work on helping individuals heal from the impact of purity culture, developing an embodied self, heal from trauma, and developing pleasure. Tara believes that our bodies hold the answers that we are seeking to find and facilitates conversations between individuals and their bodies, teaches skills to expand somatic awareness, offers observations that her clients may be unable to see, and helps her clients learn how to ask questions that help them dive deeper into themselves, encourage curiosity, and live from a place of wholeness. In her work with clients in the areas of embodiment and developing pleasure, Tara works with clients to cultivate skills to be present with sensations and emotions as they arise in their bodies. Ooh, that's a big one. And learn how to trust their body's inherent wisdom, which is a very different message from high control religion, if you know what I mean. She believes that when we are feeling blocked in relationships, sex, life, personal life, or professional life, the answers are often blocked because of fear, disconnection, disassociation, and are instead found by turning inward to work through the layers of emotion, trauma, and longing that are found there. Tara also spent 10 years working to advance the socioeconomic status of women, diminish sexual violence, and end human trafficking alongside collaborative work with community stakeholders, lawmakers, and some really, really amazing organizations. Her advocacy work has helped to pass new laws in Canada and protect victims of human trafficking, and she has established Canada's first municipal action plan to combat human trafficking, which is so incredible. Beyond her work, Tara is a TEDx speaker, a former Miss Canada, and was named Canada's Woman of the Year in 2011. She is one of the Globe and Mail's top 25 most transformational Canadians and received an International Heroes Award from the Joy Smith Foundation, as well as the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal in recognition of her vast human rights work. Whew, incredible. Tara's book, Your Body is a Revolution, came out this past year, and it is on sale. It can be purchased wherever you like to buy books, and don't forget about your local bookstore. That is quite a mouthful, and I think that is just the perfect precursor to bringing Tara into this interview, because as you can tell from her bio, she is just so many layers, so much depth to her, and I'm so excited for you to hear Tara and everything that she's bringing to our podcast. So without further ado, here is Tara Teng.
Hello, Tara. It is so wonderful to have you here. It's so good to finally meet you, talk to you face to face.
I know. We've spent so much time going back and forth in like the DMs on Instagram and email. So I'm really happy that we just get to spend some time together today.
Yes, I think it's going to be so good. This is a topic that I feel like can be a little bit of a buzzword, on social media. And yet at the same time, when we're talking about embodiment, it's so important because it's so essential to healing, especially when we're
being human.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Who knew it? Like we have a body, we should live in it.
Yes. We can't live without our bodies. And we've tried for so long and it's just, we're missing out on so much.
Yes. So I'm excited to get into all of that. But before we kind of get into some of the professional type things, can you just share with our listeners briefly kind of your own background, maybe having to do a little bit with high control religion, maybe how that helped you become disembodied and then kind of leading into this path of embodiment and even how that led you into a professional space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a small town on the west coast of Canada. It's pretty conservative, but the family in the home that I grew up in, though, was very conservative. We attended a Baptist church. My dad is still a Southern Baptist pastor to this day.
Wow.
So those of you who kind of know the nuances when I say Southern Baptist, you kind of have an idea of the subculture that I grew up in. We're part of the homeschool movement, very purity culture, very conservative. And so that was the world that I grew up in, and everything is kind of laid out ahead of your life for you already, right? So there's really no place for discovery or exploration. It's expectation, right? Very much the childhood where you go to somebody's home or even your own maybe, and you see those crafted signs that say as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That was my upbringing. Right. And so it's a very disembodying experience when you're going through your childhood or your teenage years and there's no opportunity to figure out who are you. It's dictated to you. It's told to you who you are. Right. And everything in your world, because our whole world was the church. Growing up in the church, our whole friend group was the church. And it's complex too. I'm sure a lot of people, I hear this a lot with my clients, the nostalgia of, when I was a child in these places, there's a lot of fondness for the good times and the memories that I did have that were really, really beautiful. And as a child who doesn't know any better of the system and structure that we're being born into, that we have that fondness and we enjoyed our upbringing sometimes. But as we got older, we start to see these things peeling back and realizing that the stories that I had been taught as a child where it's everyone is welcome. Jesus loves everybody.
Right.
And realizing as you got older and saw things for as they were, that really wasn't the case. There was an expectation of who you had to be loved, to have acceptance, to have belonging in these places. And as a young person or a person of any age, really, we start to assimilate, we start to adapt who we are. We show up as the self that is expected, that is needed to have that sense of belonging and love. And that is a very, in and of itself, disembodying experience, because then there are parts of ourselves that are not unconditionally loved. There are parts of ourselves that are not fully welcomed and that we feel shame around. So we have to separate ourselves from those pieces of who we are in order to survive in these really high control religion environments.
Yeah. Oh, I resonate with that so much. What you said there about it's just inherently disembodying, but if we have to fragment ourselves essentially in order to be loved, that is not being that embodied whole self.
No. And it's so contrary to where we say I love all of you, or we have unconditional love, or God is unconditional love. But then we're taught that actually there are parts of us that God doesn't like, that maybe God even hates, or that it breaks God's heart. Right. And so for me, growing up and eventually in my adult years, finding out, I'm actually a queer person. I'm obviously a biracial person. Right. And so having all of these nuances that I didn't see that representation in my community. I didn't see other queer people in my community because queer people weren't welcome. I didn't see a lot of other people who were not white, because I grew up in a white dominated church. I grew up in a white dominated town. I didn't get to see that cultural representation even. Right. And so really picking up in those messages and feeling like you don't belong. Who you are is not welcome. Right. And then going on that healing journey of actually putting those pieces back together and finding out that there's nothing wrong with you in the first place.
Yes. Yes. One of my favorite kind of statements of like talking about trauma resolution and recovery is like trauma is coming back to your or trauma resolution, is coming back to your inherent goodness.
Yes.
Like that's where you were to begin with. And I love that because it feels so polar opposite to what so many of us were taught. And yet that's like simply what it is, coming back to our inherent goodness.
And isn't that so like hopeful and healing? Like my inner child melts when she hears that.
I love that.
That's so beautiful.
Because it's something that a child can understand.
Yes.
And they can understand the opposite, which is unfortunately what so many of us have been taught. So then to speak at that level of like, you are inherently good.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And that for me was actually this turning point moment. And I write about it in my book, this moment that really was the last straw that I decided we need to leave the church. We are done here. And I was having a conversation with my son, who at the time I think was around 5 years old or so. And we were sitting on the couch together and we're reading this book. And I had already started my healing reclamation journey, coming back to my body, doing all of this really deep work. And we're sitting there together on the couch and we're reading this book about bodies. And we're reading this book about, you know, like the DNA strands and how incredibly wise our bodies are and all the DNA that makes up who we are and how unique that is to who we are. And my little sweet child looks up at me and says, "Oh, but Mama, my DNA is bad." Because there had been a Sunday school teacher that had taught him that down to his core, in his very DNA, that there was something that was wrong with him, that he was broken, that he was sinful, that he was bad and in need of a savior. And I could not look at my child and say that this is the inherent truth about who you are. That he's inherently evil. No, my precious child is so good and so pure and so good. And so that was it. When I was like, I can see the harm. I was starting to put together the pieces of how my body had been speaking to me of the harm that I had endured in this environment. And that was starting to seep into my child. And I was like, nope, that's it. We're done. And we walk away and we break the cycle right there.
Yeah. That's incredible and so touching because I'm not a parent and will not have my own children, but I do have many nieces and nephews.
Yes.
And so I can see, and they're young, they're all quite young.
Sure.
And so to see like their innocence and just their curiosity and just their natural, you know, drive for life and excitement. Right. And I know that as an observer, I've been able to see them and be like, I cannot imagine telling a 4-year-old niece or nephew that you are bad, you are evil, you don't even deserve the air that you breathe. And so, I've heard that parental piece before of when it boils down to it, and I'm supposed to now pass this on to my child, all of a sudden you go, I can't do that. And it becomes the turning point for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the turning point for me. You know, there were a lot of things that had been building. I had been questioning for a long time. And I had been fighting with the leaders of the institution for a long time, being like, I can see this and I can see that. And like, what's going on? Right. There's like a TED talk that exists out there of me saying like, Jesus made me a feminist because I was like, I'm going to change the institution from the inside out. Right. And yet at the same time, realizing that like, no, these are things that sometimes at some point you have to step away, right? When the institution and the individuals within there are not looking for it. And then you have to go back for yourself.
Yes, 100%.
Right? And that's a journey for me, for my child, and with the work that I do with clients, and even this book that I just put out.
Yeah. Yeah. So share a little bit about, because you talked about how just your very upbringing, your identity, like all the parts of you led to this very disembodied place.
Yeah.
What was it that kind of got you on that path towards embodiment, or what were some of the things that kind of stood out to you in your own experiences?
Yeah. Well, I think I found embodiment through my own just devastating heartbreak that I went through. I left the church and also for other reasons, simultaneously left a marriage that was also harmful for me and unhealthy for me. So I left these two pillars in my life at the exact same time. And so as I am healing through these things, one of the things that came up was realizing the way that I had stored trauma in my body, the way that I had adapted to my environments in order to survive and stay safe, those survival coping mechanisms that we go to that are so brilliant that our body has for us.
Right.
It keeps us alive. It keeps us safe. I'm so grateful for it. And it kept me through these scenarios that were really hard and really difficult. Right. And so I was simultaneously healing through both at the same time. And embodiment was the thing that I found. Somatic practices were the thing that saved me. As I started to unpack that and started a conversation with my body, probably for the first time since my very, very early days, where I could then realize that, oh, my body isn't bad. My body isn't sinful. My body isn't for other people. My body is here to be my ally. My body is here to speak to me. My body picks up on things and is warning me of things that are not safe or that are harmful, far beyond my conscious mind is able to figure these things out. And that I can trust my body. My body is good for me. My body is not trying to lead me astray. My body is trying to bring me to the place of most safety, of most freedom, of most healing. And that I can listen to my body to find the right way forward. And that was so revolutionary for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I loved hearing the passion too in your voice, because it's so real, right? You know, and the beliefs and practices that you have now about your body. It's such a contrast to where you started, you know. I can really resonate though with the parallel between, you know, understanding like what I would call like an abusive religion or abusive like religious teachings. For me, it was an abusive partner as well. And going, these are so similar. I can't unsee it anymore. I can't unsee how those have impacted me, how I've lived in that space. Yeah, absolutely.
And I see this a lot with my clients as well too, because so many of us, if we've been assigned female at birth, there's a certain socialization that comes with that, right? There's a certain expectation. If we need to exist in a church that is primarily patriarchal, right? And really not inclusive to women, to femmes, to queer people, to these other marginalized identities where we don't have that space for everyone to be, right? It's so easy to see how many people end up then in relationships where their full self isn't welcome, where they feel like they have to walk on eggshells, where they are not safe enough to speak their truth because there's this one way that they're expected to be, that they're expected to submit, that we're taught all the time to submit and to obey. And the man is the head of the household. And this, like you said, like this spiritual abuse in these Christian environments that then just transfer over into our relationships because we're already groomed to just accept these things.
Yes, I very much appreciate everything that you've said there, because I think that there's so many people who were socialized female who grew up in these ways that I don't want to say that they hold a different there is a different weight, I think. You know, I think that anybody growing up in these environments can be very harmed regardless of your gender. And yet there's something so unique about the way that women or those socialized female in high control religion bear a burden or the brunt of some teachings in a way that impacts them. I don't know, just on an even different level. And I don't know if you.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. And then for me, even the nuance too of being an Asian woman as well too, and having that already, that subservient, submissive stereotype doubly on top of the Christian woman, subservient, submissive stereotype, right? And so a lot of the people, and myself included, I realized that the majority of my life I spent with my nervous system in freeze or in fawn.
Yes.
And so being able to then use the modality of somatics and my relationship with my body, my embodiment, to be able to heal this social conditioning that I had been stuck in as my survival mechanism. That has been such a helpful tool, and a tool that I use with clients all the time, because we see all the time so many people who have been in these environments or who are socialized as women. Now, all of a sudden, we tend to fawn, we people please, we don't know how to speak up for ourselves. We're afraid to ask questions or be too much or be seen as a troublemaker or even reclaim our sexuality or our sensuality, because all of these things have been threats. All of these things that we've been taught to stay away from, to not be that type of woman. And so deeply ingrained in our nervous system is this fear of stepping out of line.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we freeze or we fawn as a result.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something I wrote about in my book as well, is that especially for women, children, and others in marginalized bodies in high control religion, in so many ways, the only responses we have at our disposal is freezing and fawning.
Yes.
As you know, it's inescapable, it's consistent, it's persistent over time. Yeah. And then I think too, for those, especially for women getting out of those environments, you come out into a culture that isn't that dissimilar from what we grew up in, you know? And so it really is, you kind of like, you're like, oh, okay, good. We're out. I can live. And that is true to an extent, right? There are different conditions that you're kind of living under in some ways. And yet, yes, we are in this culture then that still encourages disembodiment, that still encourages us to silence and fragment ourselves. And encourages us to stay in these spaces, like you said, of freeze and fawn, because, you know, women who fight, no.
Totally. You know, well, and that's just it. That's just it. Like it's not accessible for us to go to fight, for example, because then you're an angry woman. And especially if you're a woman of color, then you're an angry woman of color. Right. And so that's not safe to be able to express that full spectrum of human emotions that includes anger, frustration, all resentment. You cannot access that. Those aren't the fruits of the spirit. Right. And so then, of course, you can't, that part of you, you're disconnected and disembodied from that part of it. And you need somatic healing to be able to come back into and find safety in expressing your anger in a way that is healthy and is not harmful, right? Like there's healing on that journey. It's the same thing when it comes to flight. Like you can't run out of there because you're not allowed to have boundaries. You're not allowed to say no, right? You just have to submit and accept these things. So then the very fact that you're saying no, that is healing in and of itself. The very fact that you can say, no, actually, I'm going to leave this scenario because this is not okay. And that has nothing to say with, oh, you have a lack of faith. She left because she had lack of faith. She didn't know how to endure. No, she left because there was harm being done and she was putting a boundary there. And that is a good thing that we need to actually celebrate. Right?
I love that. Yes.
So all of these things are ingrained in our nervous system. All of these things are ingrained in our bodies, and coming back into relationship with these parts of ourselves is so incredibly healing. Like I have a client who likes to talk about it. She likens it when we're doing work together to this dinner table. And when these things come to the surface or these emotions pop up in her body, she's able to say, okay, who is present at my dinner table right now?
I love that. Yeah.
And she said, oh, it's anger is here right now. Or my impatience is here right now. Maybe insecurity is speaking to me. Maybe fear of scarcity is coming up right now. All of these very human and very understandable experiences that we go through because our emotions are human. We cannot separate ourselves from them. And they speak the truth of what's happening in our inner world.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
but so many of us
absolutely.
were taught not to have a relationship with them. So she simply just has a relationship with them. She invites them to the table. They get to sit down beside her. She can listen to what it is that they have to say. And she can take in that feedback as neutral information that doesn't have a morality assigned to it. It's not good. It's not bad. It doesn't mean that she's good. It doesn't mean that she's bad. It's just there. It's just a visitor at her table that she can sit and listen to and learn from and make the space for. And that she also doesn't have to put push away and hurry along because she's got other things to do, but she can just sit at the table and listen to it. As long as those emotions need to speak, she can give them the space to speak. And I love that visualization. It's so compassionate. It's so helpful. It's so accessible. It's so healing. And it just gives us the permission and the space that we never had before.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, you're kind of naturally talking about this, but one of the questions I had for you is like, as you're working with clients coming out of systems like purity culture, high control religions, fundamentalism, what are some of the unique kind of things that you work on with those clients? And maybe it's the same with other clients as well, but you know, just knowing how the church, and I don't mean to single out any specific church, but knowing how religion, especially high control religion, can have that unique impact on the body from the time you're born, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you see with your clients that they're kind of going through, whether that's messages, physical issues, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this because it's so practical, right? And it gives us so much solidarity where we can now hear another person's story and go, oh my gosh, that's me too. Oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Oh my gosh, I'm not alone, right? And so I work with everybody. The majority of the people who tend to find me, though, are people who are on their healing journey, either somewhere on the deconstruction journey, if we want to label it that way, or somewhere on the rebuilding journey where they're trying to figure out who they are as they're putting back together the pieces after leaving high control religion or purity culture. And so what I tend to see is we have a deep rooted mistrust of our intuition, our inner wisdom in our body. We have so many other voices swirling around us. We don't know whose voice is the voice that we need to listen to. And that is so paralyzing. That puts us into a state of freeze a lot of the time too. So we do this work to pull back all the layers, to heal and to find out what is the voice. Who is the voice that's speaking to me right now? Is this a voice of my fear, my anxiety? Is this a voice of scarcity? Maybe this is like a parent's voice. Maybe this is an old pastor's voice, right? Or maybe this is the voice of wisdom in my body. And so we do that work. And I liken it to the work of relationship. Everything that I do is looking through the lens of relationship. And what is the relationships that I hold with all of these things? What is the relationship I have with my body? What is the relationships with everything? And so we can look at these different voices and go, what is the relationship that I have with fear? What is the relationship that I have from, somebody telling me what it is that I need to do, because maybe like came from the authority of my parents, the authority of my pastor, the authority of my teachers. Like this is also relevant if you've never ever set foot inside a church, right? All of these things, right? And so I liken it to the relationship of, I know the voice of my best friend in the world.
Yeah.
I could pick out their voices in a crowd because I know who they are. We have spent so many hours in communication together. I know the voice of that person or those people.
I love that. Yeah.
And that's the same thing of my relationship with my voice in my body, the voice of wisdom in my body. The more that I am in relationship to these parts of myself, the more I can pick them out from the voices of the crowd swirling around me, everything telling me a different thing that I should do, that I'm expected to do, or that I need to do in order to be good, safe, belonging, successful, fill in the blank of what matters to you. Right. And so we do this work together, looking through everything through the lens of relationship, whether that be my relationship to my sex or sexuality, my gender identity, my body, my weight, my cultural identity, my work ethic, my faith, my everything. What is the relationship that you have? And can we peel back those layers to notice what's happening in our bodies, to name what's happening in our bodies with that thing, and to locate what's happening, and then move through what it is your body is telling you based on the relationship that you hold with that thing.
Yeah. I love that. And all of a sudden, as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, I get this. And I was like, you know what? We probably skipped forward because I would be curious to hear your, for the listener who goes, cool. I read about embodiment on catchy, memes on Instagram.
Yeah.
But what is it? Like, how would you describe, you have a client come in and they're like, this is day one for me, right? Like I'm dipping my toe into this healing piece and you're talking embodiment.
How would you describe that, like as a concept? Because I don't know that there's like a succinct definition, but like, if someone were to say, what is embodiment or what is an embodied life? How would you describe that?
It's such a good question. So I would define embodiment as the presence of living in your body, living in relationship with your body, being in the moment in your body, being in communication with your body, and that your body is actually the primary essence of how you navigate the world and who you are. It is both who you are and who you are in relationship with. And realizing that as humans who live in human bodies, we can't separate ourselves from this. We have tried forever. You can go back and we can, right now we're often talking a lot about, religious trauma and religious harm and leaving high control religion and how that is disembodying. But even before that, and I talk about this in my book, these ideas didn't just show up with like Paul in the Bible. These ideas show up way further before that. And we see even outside of the church, outside of the Bible, we see people like Plato and Aristotle talking about separating ourselves from the body. We talk about ancient Egyptian mysticism, talking about separating ourselves from the body, and that we are to prioritize things of intellect, things of spirituality over the fleshy things of our human existence. And what I'm actually saying is that no, you can't. You can't separate yourself from your body. It's not more holy to separate yourself from your body. It's not more intellectual or more wise to separate from yourself from your body, because your body is a source of wisdom. And because the deeper you go into the nature of your body, the more truths are going to actually be revealed to you. Because your body holds this ancient, primal, if you want to use that word, really interconnected wisdom about what it means to be human and what it means to be alive.
Yeah. I love that, because I've said before, probably in other places, like, I think that one of the reasons that like religion or different churches can be so against bodies, sex, and sexuality is because I think that there is a different story that our body tells than what is being told in doctrine and theology and all these rules, right? And so if we live in our body, we will be hearing a very different story that would inspire different directions, different motivations, different relationships.
Absolutely.
And that leads to an out of control person, meaning a person that cannot be controlled, tamed, contained. Absolutely. And this is why it's so powerful. This is why I literally chose the title of my book, Your Body is a Revolution. It is revolutionary. And there have been forces like the church. There have even been forces like the state that have criminalized the body, that has segregated the body, that has oppressed and isolated and imposed injustice on people based on their bodies. This is why the body is so profound. And when you take back your body, whether that be from harmful theology, from harmful religion, from racism, from sexism, from homophobia, from transphobia, when you reclaim who you are in your essence, in your body, and take back your body, you take back your power. You take back the wisdom in your body. You take back the unique essence that makes up who you are based on the intersections that you live in. And that is powerful and profound. And we need that. We need that so deeply because it's healing, but it's also so intuitive and so inspirational and so much wisdom that's in there. Lessons that we have to learn from each other that we miss when we silence it. Or we say that one way is the only good way. Absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciate that because life would be so dull, if we're right with all these weird rules and everything like that. But to live from that space of embodiment, I'd be curious to know, because, for those of us coming out of these religious, high control religions, like we're learning how to make space for difference and to deal with discomfort in our bodies
and to say like, hey, this is the way you live your life, or this is your preference, or this is your whatever. And that doesn't jive with me. And yet I have to learn how to respect that. And I have to learn how to coexist in a world where we can both show up in our bodies and it's not dangerous. I don't know if that's a question really so much as like, is that I'm just, maybe it's more of like a conversation of, is that something you see in your, coming up with your clients and whatnot? And
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I think is so healing. When we're on this healing from high control religion, when we're on our, whatever words we want to use, reclamation journey, healing journey, embodiment journey, right? Like, and even decolonizing journey, right? Because these things have been from church, from state, from politics, these things have been so intertwined, right? And so one of the things that has been really helpful for me is realizing that two things can be true at the same time. Yes. And also like that moves me outside of and away from this binary way of thinking that it is one way or it is the other way, that is my way or the highway, that it is us versus them, that is, it is right or it is wrong. But maybe there's a more expansive way to exist. Yeah. Maybe there's a more expansive way to find what is true, and somebody else's true does not have to contradict what is true for me in my body or my lived experience. Maybe there's a third way, and third way thinking is something that I do with a lot of my clients. It just naturally comes up that we sit there and we try to figure out, okay, because often we're sitting there thinking, and I have people coming to me being, I don't know what the right answer is. How do I find the right answer? I'm having this tension within me and I'm wanting to do this, but then there's this voice in the back of my mind that is saying, this is the thing that I have to do. And I don't know if that's my mother's voice or the church's voice or society's voice or whatever it is. And so we're stuck feeling like I need to pick a box. I need to either be in this box or I need to be in that box. And I need to choose a side or I need to take a place. I need to draw the line in the sand. And what if we could actually have a more expansive view than that? What if we could step back and we remove this camp or that camp or us versus them? What is the third way option that gets a win for as many people as possible? And I find that this is so deeply humanizing because now we don't have our team jerseys anymore. We don't have our flags. This is no tug of war, us versus them. And I have to vilify the thing that I don't choose because I have to choose the right thing. But maybe there's a place beyond all of the boxes where we can stand, where there is no fence, where we can stand on the open field together and actually sit and listen to one another and figure out that it's maybe not one thing or the other way. It's not left versus right or this versus that, but maybe there's actually a win if we sit here and look one another in the eye long enough to find the third way that gets the win for as many people as possible. It's such a profound shift in the way that we approach everything. And it makes so much more room in our relationships for us to be human.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think what I'm picking up from you too is, for so many of us, we grew up in this space of, kind of cut off at the neck and live in our head. Right. And then it's very easy to swing kind of to this other side of the spectrum of like, I am just going to give in to every whim, every impulse, every desire that my body has. Yeah. And I do think sometimes we need to like give ourselves space in that area just to kind of like, explore, figure it out, wiggle it out. Right. Yeah. But what I'm hearing from you is this space of balance of going, part of our body is our head too, right? And so it's like, we're living full body. We're not living just neck down or neck up. We're like living in this really, so there's like, as weird as it sounds, embodied thinking, right? Like this, like embodied critical thinking. And that's what I'm kind of hearing you say of going like, I mean, that's what third way thinking would be, is just like, I'm going to notice what's happening in my body. Yeah. I'm still listening. I'm organizing information. I'm wanting to learn. I'm noticing what lands, what doesn't, where my resistance is, where my desire to lean in is. And I'm not just requiring, this or that, right? It's this like full present experience of being with another body, another full body, including their head as well. Yeah. It's really cool. I appreciate that work. So shifting a little bit into, because I know you work a lot with like sex, sexuality, and somatics. Of course, that's always something that I think I tend to believe purity culture is one of the most harmful things coming out of high control religion, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality. Like it is so deep rooted, and the wounding of it goes so far down. I've often said, like, I am a survivor of like specific acts of sexualized violence and purity culture. It was so much easier to resolve the acts of sexualized violence against me than purity culture because of how deep it was. So I know you have a lot of clients who fit that profile as well of being a survivor of purity culture. I'm just curious to know if you could speak a little bit to, I don't know, kind of some of the things that are showing up in your quote unquote office, whether that's, in your presence or in your online space, from people coming out of these types of purity, virginity, abstinence cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the people who find me have already gotten to the point where cognitively, they don't believe in purity culture anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Intellectually, they go, I know that this wasn't about morality. This wasn't about true love waits. This wasn't about purity even. This was about control.
Yes.
And they know that in their mind, but they come to me because they don't know it in their body yet.
Right. Yeah.
Because their body hasn't caught up yet, because their nervous system is still holding on to the thing that they were told is going to keep them safe.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they need the help and the somatic skills now to have the tools to be able to shift that. So that they can now have a relationship with their sexuality, with their sensuality, with their sexual orientation, with their sexual expression, with their eroticism that is in alignment with their values and their ethics and even their faith, whatever that looks like today, and not this sticky remnant from purity culture that's left behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that has been such a beautiful journey of humanizing your whole self, of accepting and reclaiming your whole sexual liberation, your whole self-expression, and making a space where your body is safe again, where your sexuality is safe again. And sometimes people, to make it really, really practical, sometimes people have partners, sometimes people don't have partners, sometimes people have amazing partners, and they're trying to be sexual with their beautiful, patient, tender, just wonderful partners that they have, but their body goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn every time they try to be sexual with them. And this is one of the number one reasons why people seek me out, is it starts to become this problem in their life and in their sexual relationships that just keeps popping up, and they don't know how to get over it.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of resources out there either about that.
No, I fully agree with that. And I would say that it's pretty common, regardless of what the other things are that somebody's coming in to see me for. Purity culture is always playing a role in it, in their present day sex / sexuality / how they engage with their own lived experience in their body. Totally. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So you've done some special training around somatics and sexual activity, sexuality, those sorts of things. What are some of the things that you might do with your clients who are, coming to you in terms of like practices? Because like you said, there are very few resources. And I know like I tend to, I view religious trauma as trauma. I view, I think purity culture can be a form of sexual abuse. And so I tend to move into, I'm also a big somatic, practitioner. That's the core of who I am. And, so yeah, I mean, I tend to move right into kind of like internal safety, like finding internal safety and kind of working at it the same way I would work with a victim of sexualized violence.
Totally. Yeah. And a lot of the people that I work with are both. Right.
Yes.
And I'm sure you see that as well too. A lot of people have a hard time accessing their sexuality or accessing their body and having like reclaiming their embodiment, reclaiming presence in their body, because their body is a scene of a crime.
Yes. Unfortunately, I wish I didn't agree with you, but I do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it makes so much sense that we leave our bodies when we have experienced that level of harm, violence, trauma. It makes so much sense. Right. And so we go slowly, we go compassionately, we go at the pace of the body. And this is something that I tell people in the very first conversation that we have with one another is actually, I'm not your teacher. Your body is your teacher, and your body leads and sets the tone of every session that we have. And this is why I don't sell like coaching packages or things like that.
That's because that's the same as me. Yeah.
Right. We cannot push everybody through the same 14-week program, step by step by step, thinking that we're going to get the same outcome. That is not realistic for people and bodies. We go at the pace of the body, and we only go where the body gives full consent.
Yeah. I love that. And that is like when I was trying to figure out how I was going to do like coaching with CTRR, I was like, we can't sell packages. We can't, because everybody's experience and body and what they need is going to be so different. And some people might need 3 sessions and another person might need 300. And we're going to be there for all of that. As you were talking, a question popped up. Like, what would you say to the person who goes, I do believe that my body is wise. I believe that my body has all the answers, but my body has been traumatized, be it by religion, by purity culture, by, cults, whatever it is.
Yeah.
My body owns this message of, I'm not safe. I need to be oppressed and killed off and enslaved. I was taught all those messages. How would where's our entry point there with clients? Because I know that's something I've experienced too with my own client.
Yeah, we listen. We sit and we listen then. We listen to what the body wants to say. All of those stories that are living in the body, we let the body express them. We sit there just like you would come to the table to sit with a friend, right? Tell me what's true for you.
Yeah.
Tell me what's true for you. Tell me your lived experience. I want to know where you've been. And the body has been with us every step of the way. Every room we have walked into, our bodies have been there, telling the truth about it for us, right? And so when we go to the body and say, tell me what you have experienced, and the body starts to feel safe enough to speak, we listen, and it tells us about this has happened and this has happened. And I have this anger that still sits here. I have this fear that still sits here. Can you notice that it exists? Can you name it? I name fear. I name insecurity. I name whatever it is. If it's high control religion, is probably fear is somewhere in there, because fear is used as such a tactic for control,
sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then can we locate it? Because these things still live in our body. Even the science that we're seeing coming out now today, we know that memories aren't just stored in our brain. Memories are stored in our body, and they're stored in our nervous system specifically, right? And so maybe it shows up in my throat. And that's why I have such a hard time speaking up for myself, because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I do. Maybe that shows up in my gut, and I can't make decisions because I don't know which one is the right one. Right. Maybe it shows up somewhere in your heart, and it's the thing that is steering you everywhere you go. Right. And it's this undercurrent that is in every relationship that you have. We just simply listen to your body and find out what is true and what is happening in your inner world based on the lived experience that you have been through. And then as your body starts to feel safe enough to speak back and communicate with you, which usually doesn't take much, to be honest. It's amazing. As soon as you come to your body and you start to listen, you create that space of safety, and you don't come with an agenda. You come with just the position of curiosity and the willingness to listen, your body goes, oh my gosh, this is the thing that I have been waiting for.
Yeah.
And it's like this pouring out of you, right? And we remind ourselves that even if it feels too much, because we've been taught that if you start crying, you're going to cry forever. It's never, it's just going to pour out of you and the floodgates are going to happen. It'll be like the tsunami that will never stop. No, it's not. This is the same thing that I was taught and that I really believe is true from my work as a birth worker previously to my work as a somatic practitioner. They're so intertwined.
Yes.
But as a birth worker, when I'm standing at the bedside of a laboring person who is giving birth, who is in the throes of what feels like so much, I remind them that this comes from you. This can't be too much for you. This can't overpower you because it is you. And it's the same thing with our emotions, that we don't have to push back them because we fear that they're going to be too much. They are us. And we're simply giving them the space to speak. And they'll come up like waves on a shore, but just like waves on the shore from the ocean, they're going to go back down.
Yes. Yes.
You don't have to.
I love that. Yeah. That's so beautiful. I'm just curious to know, as we start to kind of wrap things up, I know we're going to do an exercise shortly here. Is there anything else you wish I would ask, or anything you want the listeners to know? Right.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so much. I mean, like when it comes to like sexuality and reestablishing embodied safety, like we didn't even scratch the surface. We didn't even talk about it yet. Right. There's so much more that is there that I would love to go into. And I think like, what is the thing that I want people to walk away from this from is that your body is your greatest ally. Your body wants to talk to you, be in relationship, is always trying to communicate to you, whether that be through physical symptoms of, for me, it was eczema. I had eczema on my skin, covered my hands and my elbows, and I would scratch until I would bleed. And it was my body's way of trying to get my attention to tell me that the environment that I was in high control religion was not safe.
Yeah.
Right. These things show up. I have a lot of clients that, are healing from vaginismus, right? Really painful sex because their body was conditioned through purity culture to see sex and sexuality and sexual expression as a threat. And has shut down and said, nope, this is how I'm keeping myself safe. I have clients who deal with digestive issues, who have IBS, because all of this high chronic stress that we have sustained when we are trying to please everybody, which is utterly inhumanly impossible, right? Your body is communicating all of these things to you all the time. And we just need to come back to it and listen and realize that our body has been on our side and on our team the whole entire time. And we just need to begin the conversation, whether that be through our sexuality, our physical health, our intuition, our trusting ourselves, all of these aspects of who we are. Our body has the answer and wants to be in communication with us. Yeah. That's simply what we do. And that's simply where it starts. That is all of it right there.
I love that. Yeah, because it is so simple. It's complex. It is. And this process of coming home to yourself is so complex. And yet there is something really simple about that as well. Just like it's simple to say we're coming home to our inherent goodness. But I love that message that you're talking about of the simplicity, and we have what we need in ourselves to know answers, to be able to, heal. I think that's awesome. So I know one of the things that we ask of all the people coming on who are the professionals, the ones that are doing it, they're in the trenches with the people working on these things. We ask you to just kind of bring with you an exercise or some sort of intervention to teach. And so I know that that's something we've talked about. This is what we call our ministry of healing, because all of our segments are based off of kind of cliche church terms. And so just a quick disclaimer for those who are listening. So the interventions, the exercises that all of our guests are teaching us are always optional for you to participate. Please don't feel like you have to do any of them. And please don't do any of them if you're like operating a big motor vehicle or something like that. just, we ask that you are in a space that feels safe for you, whatever that needs to be. And remember, you always have the option to not do this. You have the option to come back at any time, because this will live on the internet. So it's there for yours. Yeah. So that said, Tara, what would you like to bring for us today? What's the exercise that you're going to be teaching us?
There's so many that are applicable to the conversation that we had today. And I wish we had time to go through and even maybe walk through like a full session for somebody. But one tool that is accessible for us by ourselves anywhere that we are is dropping into our body using our breath. And so I love us to simply, if you're willing, maybe I could help lead you through this, similar to what we might do with a client in a session. And let's drop into our body. Let's see the same thing. If we can notice what's happening, what's present in our inner world. And let's see if we can notice it and can we name it and locate it. Let's try to bring more space for that. Right? We can have the space for that conversation, or we can simply just give some more space where it helps expand our window of tolerance that we have for the scenario we're going through, and maybe give us a little bit more clarity. This is something that's so helpful when I'm working with a client who is trying to find, what is the next right step for me? What is the next thing that I should do in my job, and with my family, in my marriage, on my healing journey? And we have all these other options or voices swirling around us. And we simply want to drop into our bodies, maybe find presence in our body, maybe find answers in our body, maybe listen to the thing that our body is trying to communicate to us. We start by dropping into our body, and we can start by using breath, something really tangible and something that we can bring more intention to. So the first thing that I would love to do for us before we begin is quickly scan the room that you're in, whatever space you're in. If you're listening and you're inside or outside, or you're in your bedroom, in your office, wherever you are, scan your room. And I want you to really place yourself in space and time. This is really helpful for us before we begin these embodiment exercises where we drop into our body, because it helps our body to remember where we are. If there's a memory or a trigger that pops up unexpectedly in our body, we can go back to this present moment and realize, I'm just sitting here in my room. I'm safe. There's no one with me. I am okay. I am safe. And reclaim that for yourself and have this anchor point to tether you in to what is happening and what is true right now. Okay, so take a quick moment, scan your space. And when you feel safe enough, we're going to close our eyes or gently rest our gaze somewhere softly around us and drop into the presence of our body. If it feels good to you, you can notice your breath. Do you have quick breaths, shallow breaths, breaths up high in your chest? Are you able to lengthen those breaths? Deepen each breath. Expand each breath. Drop deeper into your body. There are so many parts of our bodies as we're trying to rebuild relationship, come back home to our body, that we often feel disconnected from. Even previously when you were mentioning how we kind of live up in our head and we're disconnected here at the neck. Can we breathe deeper down and re-inhabit these parts of ourselves? With your breath, can you move from your chest and your neck, deepen into your shoulders, deepen lower into your arms. With your next breath, can you deepen lower into your abdomen? Deepen all the way into your belly. Let your belly go soft and round. We tend to hold so much tension in this part of our body, especially if we're trying to be safe. Relax, deepen, let go. Take up your space. Resist the urge to make yourself smaller. These things signal safety to your nervous system. If you're someone who has experienced sexual harm or violence or restriction in your sexual expression, maybe if you lived through purity culture, it might be very hard for you to breathe deeper than your belly button. But see if with your breath you can reclaim and expand even lower into your hips, into your womb space if you have a womb space, into your perineum or your genitals. Can you come back into connection with these parts of yourself without shame? Can we let our breath slow down, deepen, and expand? And maybe as we move through this, you'll sense resistance, where your body will give you a wall or a boundary or a barrier. And this is not something that we want to push past our own body's boundaries. But notice what you find. Notice what's present there. And can we look at it with curiosity? If your body puts up a wall, what kind of wall is it? Is this like a Fort Knox steel concrete wall? Is this like a white picket fence wall? Is this somewhere in between? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Take a step back and simply notice your body's communication and tell your body that you listen to them and you will respect those boundaries. You'll respect your body's no here. And maybe you'll get to experience that for the very first time. Notice how that feels in your body. Notice what's happening in your inner world. Notice how your body responds. And if your body begins to communicate with you, simply listen. You're not here with any goal or endpoint that we need to achieve. We're simply here to understand. Listen for as long as you need, as long as feels safe enough, however it takes to feel complete. And when your body has finished expressing all the things that your body needs to express, thank your body for what he, she, or they have shown you. And when you're ready, you can come back to this space, this moment in time. Reground yourself in where you are. And then we can process through and talk through or integrate whatever it was that your body showed you in that moment. How was that experience for you?
That was really good. I know that sounds like such a non-descriptive word. Yeah, I think that I'm in a space right now that's very unfamiliar to me. So on the one hand, that's good. There's nothing negative about this space, no memories that come up. On the other hand, I miss my familiarity of my space. So it was this weird, like really having to almost like tune out the external and just really focus inwards to find that sense of groundedness rather than orienting around my space. And I think that you said something about, for a lot of people that have experienced like purity culture or sexualized violence, it's hard to expand beyond the belly button.
Yeah.
And I realized that, like, I think my norm is to stop about there. Though I felt okay to kind of push further, not in a forceful way, but in a safety way. And when I did that, for me, there was like a kind of a very stark message that came up, not towards me, but towards what like the wall is created. Right.
Yeah.
And which was very surprising to me. And I was like, okay, that's where that's my homework, where I get to spend some time there.
Absolutely.
Of noticing where did that piece come from? This need to protect in such a thick way.
Yes. And see, this is just it. Your body gives you neutral communication.
Yes.
So then now you're able to take that feedback and go, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for being safe enough to express that. And now you can start to peel back those layers and go, okay, what's on the other side of that wall? That resistance, that boundary, that communication. And we peel back, okay, what's hiding behind that? What's hiding behind that? We peel back these layers until we get to the thing that the wall was protecting. And only when it feels safe enough to peel back those layers.
Yeah.
Right. We work within the realm of safe enough. So sometimes safe enough means it's a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not triggering. It's in that, like, I'm a little stretched.
Yeah.
I'm growing, a little bit of those growing pains. It's not exactly my comfort zone, but it feels safe enough and okay enough to explore. That's where the realm that we work in. We never want to push past that. And we also want to have the courage not to just stay in our comfort zone familiarity, but we want to be able to have that little bit of stretch, just ever so slight, that is safe enough for us to explore, to ask questions, to bring curiosity, and to grow.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's so good. Oh, Tara, it has been so wonderful to have you here today. I feel so honored to just have had this conversation and to participate in that exercise that you led us through. It gives me a lot to continue to kind of just sink into. So thank you. Thank you very much. I know that you just came out with a book. I am so curious to hear, just share with our listeners a little bit about that, where they can find you, if they're wanting to work with you, all the things.
Amazing. Yes. So Your Body is a Revolution just came out this year in June, and it's available everywhere the books are sold, in every format that books exist in, from audio to ebook to print. It really takes us on this journey of looking with curiosity of the relationship we have with our bodies, why we end up becoming disembodied, be that through our personal experiences or collectively because of the reality of the world that we live in. And it looks from a very intersectional lens of how we can come back to our relationships and heal our relationships with our bodies, with our relationships with one another, and with our relationships even with the earth, because all of these things are so intertwined, and this interconnectedness runs through all of it. And our bodies have the truth within them that is going to lead us back to the answers we are looking for.
I love that. And I can attest, it is a wonderful book. Please go get it.
You read it, and you were one of my early readers and endorsers, which I'm so grateful for. Hopefully there is something for everyone. And I, reading through now that it's been out in the world for a little bit, reviews that exist on Amazon and the other sites, just seeing some people saying like, I'm a 61-year-old, like cisgendered male, and I didn't think that there would be anything for me in this book, but it does. And it's brought so many great points of healing and reflection and resonance. And I am confident that there is something in this book for everyone. And also, I want it to be an embodied experience for people as they read it, that we're not just taking in more information that's going to live up in the library of our brains, but that really sinks deep into our bodies, so that has the power to transform us. So at the end of every chapter, there are exercises, there are invitations, there are journal prompts, there are things for you to take from that chapter and really start to see, where does this show up in my life, and how can I move through it in a way that is healing and more wholeness and more expressive, more liberation for all of us, because that is the thing that is revolutionary, that is going to break down these walls and barriers that have left us isolated and broken and divided for so long.
Yes. So please, everybody, go and purchase a copy today.
Go find the book. And I hope that it resonates. Would love to hear about how it sits with people after they've read it. I'm always around. You can easily find me through my website, tarateng.com. I'm all across social media at Miss Tara Teng. Or, if you want to take it one step further, if it gives you a lot to think about, after either this podcast episode or the book. I would love to hear from people, so they can find me online or on social media. I'm always open to more clients if they want to work with me, working one-on-one to learn these somatic skills, to come back to the truth that lives in their body and what that journey of healing looks like for them. I do take one-on-one clients, and I also travel and do retreats and in-person women's circles, community circles. I'm here in California right now. And so just loving that experience to bring, create these pockets of really beautiful healing and connection coming home to our bodies, no matter what body it is that we live in.
I love it. Wonderful. Well, I will make sure that all of that information and the links are in our show notes, so everybody has quick access to that. And you find Tara on social media. Tara, again, it has been so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. And you know what? Because we didn't get into a lot, we're going to just have to have you back on.
Amazing. We'll do another conversation. I can't wait.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.